RTTV is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online information from hackers. Don't let them steal your financial details. Go to expressvpn.com/RTTV to learn more. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rooster Teeth Podcast. I'm Gus.
Where were we? I'm Eric.
I'm Barbara.
And I'm Gus. And we're back. Are you
Well, he's going.
Shit.
Wow.
I think I broke mine.
That's cool.
They-
Well, you can see all the way up.
They literally just discovered that these are
Look at
recliners
them. You're
right
about to
before we
get
went
the
live.
business on that one.
You almost saw hanging brain up in there.
Oh, baby. Ooh, I just sat in gum.
Stop it.
That's just penis. I kicked my thing.
We've got recliners.
We're back,
You never realized
baby.
that. We're back.
30 seconds and we're
Podcast
breaking.
590.
We were counting with six. No.
What?
Yeah, 590. We were
Yeah.
counting before we went live. We did 54 in a row at home.
Yeah, our last one was 589, right?
Yeah, our last one in studio was 589, and this is 644.
I
This
said
is
we should just call this one at 590.
Smart. This is a
Nothing
good idea.
ever happened.
Yep.
Forget all that other shite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Skip those. 590.
Well, cheers. Back to
We're back.
being in studio.
Cheers,
Oh,
everyone.
is this what we're cheersing, or do we cheers what's
Oh.
on the table, friends? Gus.
Oh.
You.
Uh-huh.
So we've argued recently about whether frozen Cokes are the same as Coke Slurpees.
Mm-hmm.
So to settle this argument, you went and bought melted versions of both
No,
of
no,
them.
no, no.
And you
when
brought
I
them
got
in.
them, when I brought them here, they were good to go.
When did they get here? Like 2 hours ago?
They got here.
Look at this.
5 minutes
Look at that.
before.
Did they-
Five,
is that a-
five simple minutes
Is that
before.
a Coke Slurpee or is
And
that
then-
just a Coke?
I
Do
think
they
it's
what
just
happened?
melt to Coke? Do they become Coke?
I don't know. You have to
Fla-
taste
they
both
become-
and see.
They become flat Coke.
It looks like a science experiment I did in high school where I took water, oil, and one other liquid that I'm forgetting right now, so you could see like the density
Yeah.
and how they separate. That's what that looks
That's
like.
exactly what that looks
Yeah.
like.
Well, here's the thing. Gus wouldn't stop talking.
Listen,
about it. Every
I don't
time I
care-
talk to Gus, he's saying frozen Coke, frozen Coke.
Because
he keeps saying
I'm going to
it.
get to enjoy a delicious frozen Coke with my friends.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm realizing right now that I'm very hyper aware of?
What's that?
The audience at home, they're seeing our legs for the first time in a really long time.
Look at my legs.
We've got legs still.
No!
I got a stick and poke tattoo of a little pizza slice.
Why is it shiny?
you'll
Oh, is it
never
that
regret
one?
that.
I have like Aquaphor on it. There we go. I got pizza vacation tattoo.
So which one's the good one? Is any of them good? I don't like Coke.
This garbage. This garbage. The McDonald's one's good. The other one's good.
Good.
This is garbage. 7-Eleven, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Oh shit. Oh, that's disgusting.
I told you. That one's good. That's delicious right
This
there.
is gonna be just as bad. Oh, that's on my knee now.
So why did we get both of them? You just wanted to know if they were the same thing?
I wanted to, yeah, because I think they're the same.
Can I get some whiskey for this? Is that a drink?
All right.
Is whiskey a drink?
Whiskey, is
Can you
whiskey
drink-
and Coke a drink? Yes.
Yeah, but whiskey and frozen Coke.
Could
What's
you?
that called?
Do we have
It's
that?
called whiskey and frozen Coke.
Are we gonna get yelled at if we do that?
What, yelled at for whiskey?
Yeah.
It just tastes like flat Coke.
Yeah. This is a terrible
The 7-Eleven.
experiment.
Why?
Because they're all melted.
What? Oh, okay. Well, let's go to 7-Eleven and get them new. What do you want to do?
Yeah,
right.
the McDonald's way
You
Well, then
you
we-
brought them over and they were melty. I put them in there and they were perfect.
I like that
So-
we can argue in real life.
There's no delay.
Yeah.
I could see someone's face as I'm yelling at them.
Everything I could ever want.
I wore pants specifically for the podcast today. Normally I don't, because like you said, we haven't shown our legs in a year. Normally I'm just hanging brain in my desk chair when we're doing the podcast.
Just
Throw
two
that
dogs
term back.
staring at
Yeah.
you.
Let's leak some projects. Nick's gonna get so mad. It's been so many years since we've done a formal tour of the Linus Tech Tips office and studio that I can't even really call it the Linus Tech Tips office and studio anymore. We've got so many channels and so much has changed that you're barely going to recognize this place. Even our access control doesn't work anymore. Look at this. Because we got a shiny new one from Ubiquity. And this video is brought to you by Anchor. They got us equipped with their PowerComp Bluetooth speakerphones as well as their C300 webcams so that we can remote work in style. With that said, most people are in the office today, so let's go see them. Starting in the reception room, we get the first look at the renovation slash makeover that has been mostly spearheaded by Yvonne and Janice, but also helped in no small part by Matthias and the rest of the logistics team, because they wouldn't have been able to make it over if it hadn't been significantly tidied up first. So we got rid of our old logo and the textured checkerboard feature wall and replaced it with, well, an up-to-date logo for the company, which was wrong for a long time, as well as the thumbnails of our top 12 videos. Some of these, it makes a ton of sense that they're here. Some of them, I wasn't even sure if they were content, but for whatever reason, people watch it. We made some small changes to the kitchen, so we've got kind of a graffiti aesthetic going on in the editing den down here that I think looks super cool in an edgy, like, 90s, early 2000s kind of way. And then our kitchen actually sees very little use because, again, thanks COVID, we're not allowed to have coffee machines, so they're like taped over and stuff like that. Which brings us into Taryn's office. No, but seriously, he doesn't actually get his own office forever. You can see that while we used to have the headphone wall and some decorations and couches and play buttons in here, now we've got 4 more desks for future editors once we can cram them in and once we actually need them. And this is intended to be kind of like a quieter editing room. Taryn, can you just run us through, how many keyboards do you have now?
Well, there's
3, but okay, so you don't count the Stream Decks as a keyboard, even though they have like,
call it
they have 32 keys each.
Yeah.
That's why we call them the Macro King. Moving into the main editing den, which is now much larger than it used to be, we've got, whoa, what is this? There's an office. We added a window to this thing so it wouldn't feel like a dungeon. And then he goes and turns the light off almost literally all the time. Sup, Ed? Now that he is our formally like manager of the editors and not just like head editor or whatever, he needs an office so that he can like have meetings with people or whatever. You can't tell because a lot of them are work from home, but this is Mark. Oh, hi, Mark. We've got probationary employee number 4 or whatever. There's so many new hires lately. This is Dennis's desk. Here's Hoffman. We've got Nicole over there. And finally, we've got probation employee number G. And then these are really cool. There's certain things that are better done in an editing booth. These aren't quite done, but the purpose of this room specifically is color grading. So we're gonna add bias lighting for the monitor, add blackout blinds for the door. We're gonna come up with a better system for covering the sensor on this. So you can basically darken this thing, have all the tools that you need for proper color grading for HDR, and we're gonna start uploading at least our mainline Linus Tech Tips videos in HDR on YouTube, which is something that's really exciting. Next door, we have a second booth that's going to be all about that acoustic foam and all about that sound isolation. So we've got some more foam that we're going to be loading up into the ceiling to help prevent sound from bleeding over the walls. We're going to add studio monitors because really that is supposed to be how you edit the sound for your videos. And we're going to equip this with all the equipment that we need for proper sound mixing. And at every one of these desks, we have freaking badass workstations. I hand built every single one of these myself. They are 24-core Threadripper processors with 128 gigs of RAM. Most of them have RTX 3090s or Quadros with more than 24 gigs of VRAM, so we can handle that stupid bug with the Ursa Mini 12K footage. And they've all got 25 gigabit networking, so that editing on your timeline is as fast off of our server as it is if you just had the files locally on a high-speed drive. Oh, and of course, every one of these stations has 2 pairs of headphones. Why? Well, for in the non-COVID times, the writer sits next to the editor and reviews the video together. It's so collaborative. Also, the Penguin needs one. Now it's time to visit the workshop. Although we call this the PC Build Corner now that we have a proper workshop. So the main changes here are aesthetic. Matthias redesigned it with new wraps on the countertops, much better storage for tools, water cooling fittings, all the cables that we need for building computers and testing them, and this handy dandy rack so we don't constantly have to go bother them when we need a monitor for a test station or whatever the case may be. Also here is the TechLink set. If you'll excuse me though, I have to host TechLink for a second. Thanks for watching TechLink. We'll see you again on Friday. All right. Now you guys have my full and undivided attention. Over here is our green screen. This used to be used primarily for TechQuickie, but actually now that we've moved TechQuickie to more of like a seated sort of host type of style, we don't really use it that much other than to mount seamless paper, which we store on the back of the green screen wall, and then use colored lights to turn that into sort of whatever color backdrop we want. And you dress that up with like a desk, a little bit of furniture, and you can create pretty much any look you want. Which brings us to the set you guys are probably most familiar with. This is the apartment, which has been renovated a couple of times, but not structurally. We've just done new paint, new decorations, that kind of thing. The main purpose of changing over from having just the old orange walls set to this more homey feeling one was that we wanted the videos to feel less like they're being shot in a studio and more like they're being shot in a home, and in particular in a part of a home that is relevant to the type of product that we're talking about. They shoot everything from A-roll to B-roll to even audio pickups here because it's one of the areas of the building that has the best acoustics thanks to the open ceiling and of course acoustic foam that we have sprayed on the walls and rafters. Oh, this is something that's actually kind of new since our last tour. So I kept giving Brandon a hard time about just moving the same damn lights over here, and then over here, and then back over here, and back over here, and back over here. And I was like, look, we need something that looks pretty decent, but just is one click to set up. And he's like, how much you want to spend? And we ended up with that. Of course, a big part of keeping the sets uncluttered is having somewhere to store your equipment, and we actually just very recently retooled this entire area. Here's our charger for our Titan tubes. These things are so much fun because they are RGB AF. You can set up all kinds of cool patterns on them and stuff, and because they're battery powered, it saves so much work in rigging. We used to have all of our cameras in a lockbox, but now we're gonna move to a system where they're all gonna be in a cage here because it got to the point where it was just like half an hour at the end of the day and half an hour in the morning just rigging up and then unrigging these cameras, and usually in exactly the same way. Yet another COVID thing is that we have to have a lot of distance between our camera guys at their desks. Now, they do more than just operate cameras. David, for example, is on the Carpool Critics podcast. Make sure you guys are subscribed to that if you're a movie buff, or even if you're not and you just like David's beautiful face, because it's also a video podcast on YouTube. And then that's Brandon's desk, where occasionally he will do things like color work for some of our more complicated projects, like say, for example, those recent car videos on the Chevy Volt and Tesla Model Y. And then over here, we have repurposed our old laptop charging cart, which we found was actually kind of inconvenient once we got down to it, into an all batteries charging cart. So it's just an all metal enclosure. So in the event we have an unexpected fire or anything like that, it will all be contained within this metal cart. Yay! As part of our upgrade to 25 gigabit fiber optic networking, we didn't just upgrade the editing stations, we also upgraded our ingest stations. So nowadays, with a combination of red mag readers as well as USB Type-C SSDs like we use on the Ursa Mini 12Ks, we can actually do what, like up to 500 megabytes a second, 800? About 800 megabytes a second of each of these concurrently. Andy insisted I show you guys the tape wall. So this is where they keep gaff tape and stuff. And then here are their tools for rigging up and tearing down cameras. But I think it's actually more interesting to talk about this table. So some cameras get used the same way day in, day out, say for example for short circuit. But other ones need to be reconfigured and very differently often. So you can see the battery has been set up to be kind of like a stock that you can support on your shoulder. The top here has this nice handy small rig rail thing so that you can attach it to an easy rig that comes over your head and supports most of the weight of the camera. You hold here where your record button is. You got your screen right in front of your face like this, and then you would actually put a follow focus on this rail right here, and you can use that to adjust both your focus and zoom on your lens. Following the fresh yellow lines on the floor, this is the no zone, so you're not allowed to store anything in these walking paths. We've got our forest of light stands and tripods, as well as our custom C-stand holders that apparently we are finally getting rid of for a commercial solution. We've got our bin of light stands, as well as our flags. This right here is the short circuit set. This has been under construction for a few weeks now, and I think looks absolutely fantastic. Shooting short circuit is supposed to be as simple as grab the product, grab the host, get the impressions at the table, and you are done. This is the A cam that the host typically talks into. This is the B cam, which is actually operated by our camera operator who is monitoring all three cameras. And then this is our overhead camera. Every single one of them is already set up, already ready to go, and we don't even need to bring any media to the set and install it in the individual cameras, and they're all powered off the wall, so there's no batteries. It's just freaking ready to rock. Short Circuit will also have its own kind of homey and unique looking space separate from Linus Tech Tips. Oh, hey, the director has taken his chair over there. Jono does most of the Short Circuit channel coordination in addition to his business duties. This won't be anything new for camera people, but for the rest of you, the follow focus that I alluded to before is basically a separate knob that controls a motor at the other end of a unit. So that's the way that one camera operator can just have all the focus and zoom dials in one spot. At least they will in the future. Right now we've only got the one hooked up. And they can just kind of like monitor everything. It's pretty cool. Now we're heading into what I call the red light district. This is where we keep all our sexy costumes and props and all that kind of stuff. There's not really that much here because we just purged an absolute ton of it. And we've got Andy's desk. Poor Andy. Yeah, COVID safe. He's got to be way over here. Don't worry, we'll get you over there with the other shooters soon enough. Behind the sets, where it just used to be a ton of clutter, we now have our DMX control modules for our RGB lighting that's over in the bedroom set, as well as our giant diffusion flags and our ladder for getting up into the grid and stuff like that. It's way more organized, and we've got these nice motion sensing lights back here so you can actually see what the heck you're doing. Bringing us into the bedroom set, which is likely to be the resting place of our Mac channel that we're working on. I'm just gonna hit this light so we can actually see what we're, Basically, it used to be a bed and kind of like a bedroom setup in here, which is why we call it the bedroom set, but all that's left of the bedroomness is a mattress in the corner, and we're just gonna make it more of just like a homey, cool hangout. A super cool thing about the bedroom set is that you can actually close it in so that you can shoot in any of the 4 directions in here. There we go. And not have any doorways in the way. Well, except this one anyway. This is our super tidy, thank you Jake, networking setup for the set. So all of the ports, thanks to this MikroTik switch, are 10 gigabit. So even if we're doing something really more test benchy and less shooty on set, we can get full speed networking and benchmark to our heart's content. Left or right? Left, okay. Now we're in what used to be one of the only office spaces in this building, but it has been significantly redecorated. So what used to be the writing den out here is now the accounting department. We got Special Agent Janice, who was of course responsible for a lot of what we did, except this. Janice was not responsible for that network port over there not working and us needing to hook up to this one. And this used to be my office. It is now Yvonne's office, and she shares it with 2 more members of the accounting department. Can we all take a moment to appreciate, by the way, how hilarious the name of the accounting department is? Accounting corridors, get it? Because they're accounting corridors. And this is our boardroom. We have significantly remodeled this thing. We've kept the original table and built-in bench, but now, when we're having meetings, we get to look at that wall and be inspired, and look at this one and also be inspired. All of our chairs grew legs when we hired a bunch of new people, so there's actually no chairs in here. But we recently added the Anker PowerConf S3, which they sent over as part of the sponsorship for this video. It's got a really nice clear sounding speaker that everyone in the room can hear, and more importantly, it's got 6 microphones built in, so you can actually see them all around it, so that the person at the other end of the call can hear everyone in the room clearly. It is a huge benefit, and because we've got there it is, this handy dandy USB equipped power thing there. We just leave it right there. We have a really short USB that we plug in when it needs to be charged, and we're good to go. Coming out of the conference room, we've got Clarence, who I think has probably the 2nd most badass workstation in the building. Look at this. He even went to the lengths of putting gaff tape in between the monitors so that he wouldn't get, you know, little slits of light distracting him from his Excel's superpowers. This is inconvenient. I was gonna say that Nick's office is no longer Nick's office, but now Nick is sitting in it because he wants to confuse everybody, I guess. This is now a call/meeting room, and for some reason, Nick is talking to someone who doesn't work here anymore, so that's a little strange. Yeah, it's an awkward way to find out, Colton. Sorry about that, but okay, see you later, buddy. Nick has now moved over to Creator Warehouse, and we will go there, but not yet. First, I'd like to show you guys Colton's office. Colton's work from home because it's an awful long drive for him, and also I think about a third of the space in his office is now storage. We took away the business team's shelves. Hopefully they will turn them over a little bit faster. Coming out of Colton's office, we've got the team that he pretty much exclusively manages now. We saw Jono downstairs. Chase, I don't know what Chase is doing today, but he does event coordination for us. And then we've got probationary employee number 6 or whatever it is we're on here, as well as Jeff and Matt. So Jeff's in sales, and then Matt does procurement. And if you guys aren't disoriented yet, you will be now. This is the stairwell down to the main entrance that used to only go one way, but now goes 2 ways. This unit over here was where we used to have the lounge downstairs, but now has the lounge upstairs, and it has been completely remodeled. We now have more than enough room for our ping pong table, more than enough room for our games table once we're finally able to do staff events after hours. We've got our D-brand provided current generation consoles. Thank you very much for that D-brand. And our sick Klipsch/LG OLED home theater setup. That's not really a home theater, I guess, because it's more like a work theater. We're actually going to be upgrading this soon with an incredible Sony laser projector. So stay tuned for that video. You are going to want to be subscribed. All the computers have been moved upstairs now as well, so we're almost ready to get some sick Worms Armageddon action going. And check this out. The logo has returned, but now with its very own feature wall. Not only does it still have RGB, oh yeah, but this thing looks absolutely incredible. It's an absolute work of art. So Special Agent Janice and Yvonne mixed their own blue and bluey green paint colors, did the entire wall with this sick pattern that we all thought was great already. Then they covered the whole thing in masking tape, painted it black, and then ripped it off. So we have this like sick circuit boardy style pattern to go along with our illuminated logo. On the subject of painstakingly difficult projects, this one wall is responsible for how many hours of work, Vaughn? And then we ruined the whole thing with a Comic Sans LTTstore.com at the top. And Lucky Creator Warehouse, they get to be right next to the lounge and this basketball hoop. Sarah, hey, thanks. We don't have a basketball, we lost it, but we do have these Linus plushies that are soon to be available on LTTstore.com. Wow, that was really terrible. Anyway, the point is, this is where our engineer Kyle sits. We've actually got 2 more engineers that are starting so we can work on all kinds of projects that involve injection molding, PCB design, all that kind of stuff for LTTstore.com. In the middle, we've got customer service, as well as Bridget and Hannah, our fashion designer, and I guess pattern maker would be probably the best way to describe Hannah's job. So for that reason, a lot of the new projects like WAN Hoodie V2, which is finally coming soon, are going to be up. Oh, you know what? Let's leak some projects. Nick's going to get so mad. Where's the WAN V2? Okay. Oh, here's the original one. So it's the original WAN Hoodie. See, we still have some brand new ones, actually. And it's not Nick coming over, is it? I don't want to get in trouble. The best way to not get in trouble is to have him not see me doing things that get me in trouble. So this is new WAN Hoodie. Still got like all the like waterproof pockets and stuff. There's matching sweatpants. Oh yeah, Sarah, do you recall how much this stupid fit mannequin cost? Yeah, it's like hundreds of dollars, and according to Bridget and Hannah, this isn't even like one of the really good ones. So let's see if he's wearing pants. Down the other side, we've of course got Nick, an empty spot for a new hire in the future, the one and only Sarah Butt with her army of dinosaurs protecting her workspace from intruders. Excellent, Sarah. And then this is Lloyd's desk, where he has made his own sunlight blocking thing to protect his screen and Sarah's eyes or whatever from the sun. You know, we put them in the one part of the office that has natural light. The one freaking part of the office that has natural light, they complain. Shall we make our way down into the hold? Logistics here does so much more than just a typical warehouse type of role. Like, for example, they still do have to receive inventory, which sometimes is small and easy to deal with, and other times is extremely large and on the back of a truck and fragile. But in addition to that, they also have to do things like diagnose sometimes, you know, very arcane pieces of hardware, or stuff that they might not have a ton of familiarity with, like say for example this maybe sort of not working, you know, boom arm for a microphone. They've got to do all of it while looking extremely pretty, which is a challenge in a department like this because there's so much hardware coming in and out of this place that it can be difficult to keep it all organized. There's Matthias right there. I got to keep my 2 meters from him because I'm not wearing my mask. And then we've got Nicholas, as well as Serge, who is hiding over by the jackets because he's so shy. Go get Serge, Andy. See, Serge? This went from 0 to absolute freaking hero. Look at this. This might as well be an electronics store. We've got our cooling, we've got our water cooling, we've got our motherboards. They are sorted by chipset. We have magnetic labels so we can move them around. We got our power supplies. All right, ladies and gentlemen, they're sorted by wattage. Freaking love it. The point of this is that when we have multiple projects on the go, which happens often, I will show you that area soon, it's nice if multiple people can have a 2080 Super or whatever it is that they need it. Look, even we don't have a huge surplus of 3000 series. These are 3090s, but these are actually for our editing stations when we water cool them in the very near future. This is the old CPU/RAM storage rack. Yeah, and of course, now that M.2 is a thing, we've got our SSDs here as well. This is probably the sickest shelf in the entire office if you guys are into, like, I don't know, computers or whatever. Down here is our podcast/live streaming setup. And why is it here? Because this is going to be the new set for ideally both Carpool Critics and the WAN show. That is, once we've put in some acoustic panels and some big thick carpet and stuff like that. This is something I'm pretty proud of. This is the graveyard system. So it used to be that if we had a case that went back without some accessory, and then we found a spare accessory, but we didn't know what case it went with, the accessory got thrown away, and then the case didn't have it the next time we opened it, and then it was useless. But now we've got graveyards. So if you find a thing that you know looks important, but you're not sure what it goes with, you just put it in one of the graveyards, and then hopefully they will become reunited with the thing that they came from, and everything will be hunky-dory. Left or right? Left, okay. Now let's see what would have happened if we had turned right instead of left. Ha, 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 I get it. We would have ended up in the writer's block. Get it? Get it? Over here, we've got Madison, our social media coordinator, with her excellent goggly eyes on the back of her chair. And then over on this side, you're gonna find a lot of familiar faces. The one and only Jake, who set up that Ubiquity access control, along with our new security cameras.
Along with writing videos, along with doing a bunch of my network infrastructure. You guys know what he does. Don't worry about it. I think he made the Minecraft and Discord server on the side.
James, who has actually, I think, been promoted since the last time I formally did a tour and talked about people. So he is my right hand, you know, and I'm right-handed, so that's a good thing. So he helps me manage the rest of the writing team as well as continuing to produce videos on his own. He also does a lot of the hosting these days on TechLink, TechTwiki. We've got the one and only Riley. See, I'll take the place of Riley today. This is Riley's desk. He writes TechLink, as you guys probably know. The one and only, the legendary Anthony, who has been, of course, writing LTT, helping out with the Mac guys, providing technical support for the technical support. And then he's been doing quite a bit of Linus Tech Tips hosting lately. Massive high five to Anthony, good job, thank you. Now we're not actually allowed to touch. Over here we've got someone on probation, so you can't see them. And then now we're in sort of like the NG corner. So Colin's desk is right here, he's off today. And then Alex's 2 desks. Oh, you put this here for this, didn't you? Oh yeah. I know you did. This is our absolute one-of-a-kind 10 million subscriber diamond play button RGB lit gaming PC. I'm calling it a gaming PC. We've got these cool little shelves and wall mount things where we can put all the different knickknacks we need, like little compressed air thingamaboobers for cleaning stuff out, alcohol for cleaning off CPUs, iFixit kits, all those little materials that we need so we can keep our workspaces a little tidier. These are the scripts of some of our top videos, including all the little annotations that we do to help the editor with their visualizations. So That's kind of one of the collaborative things that the writers and the editors work together on. This has been where we've hosted the podcast, the Carpool Critics podcast, but soon it won't be. This is going to be the call/meeting room for the writing team once all of this podcast crap is out of here. And then this is my office. Colin is still working on my upgraded desk PC, so hopefully I'll have a video on that for you guys soon. So this is still the OG one. And of course, this is actually a perfect opportunity to show off my Anker C300 webcam. So they do 1080p, 60 FPS with a 115-degree field of view. Not necessary for me since I end up sitting so far from my webcam, but what does help when I'm so far from my webcam is the microphone is excellent. I get absolutely no complaints whatsoever about my audio quality, and I really like that they use a USB Type-C connection, because if I do want to take it with me on the go, you can just kind of fold it up, grab your cable, and you don't have to worry about like which way it goes in when you're hooking it up to your laptop. This is my workbench where I've got a UPS just in case the power goes out while I'm flashing a BIOS or whatever the case may be. Everyone has UPSs on their workstations and on their test benches. I cannot overstate the importance of a good UPS. This is where I put all my awards, like, you know, oh, do I have any that I lost here? No, here's one though. I'm gonna put this up in place of honor here, next to my, my dead thread ripper. There you go. 404, success not found. Scrapyard Wars 7. Here are the chairs people sit in when I'm having meetings with them. Oh, if you guys haven't seen this video, by the way, make sure you go watch it. My chair is pretty special. It's actually got sub-ambient chilled water cooling built into it for those hot days. Oh, these are the LTT sticker packs that you get with current orders on lttstore.com. And I guess that's pretty much it for this room. It does have some cool decor that Yvonne and Janice worked on, but it wasn't part of this makeover, like my Apple clock and my Apple-themed corkboard that need to be some minor issues. Just outside my office, we've got the writing team for the upcoming Mac channel, as well as another on probation LTT writer. All of them have these same Anker webcams. The reason for that is we have to conduct all of our meetings over like Microsoft Teams now because thank you COVID, but hey, at least it helps to have nice fast autofocus. That's another one of the sort of key points about these. Bringing us finally to the workshop, which doesn't have an inside doorway into the rest of the office because it's a concrete supporting wall for the building that we're in. This place is basically unrecognizable from the last time I showed it to you guys. It used to just be that bathroom boxed in and then an open freaking empty concrete warehouse. And I gotta say, they have done a pretty bang up job of it. We've got our vertical and horizontal belt sanders. I'd only ever seen this, and now that I've seen this, it absolutely changed my life. Got our bench grinder, got our sandblaster that I think it is pristine in here. We've yet to actually use this one, but did you use it once? All right. We've got a way better bandsaw than we used to have, drill press, all the fittings that we could want. Well, I could still want more fittings, but that's a lot of fittings. Pretty much all the tools we could want. This is gonna be a paint booth at some point in the future. Oh, wow. They've actually made progress on this since the last time I looked at it. So the idea is that it's supposed to suck air in through these filters, and then that's an air replacement from outside so that we don't end up with negative pressure in here. This is Kyle, who has a toaster oven. So that's our workstation for like soldering or electronics work. Here's our Speedy 400 Flex laser, let's call it a cutter. Use it for engraving too though. These are the discs for the reservoir for my new desk PC that Colin is working on. In fact, ow. After I made fun of Yvonne so much for dropping her phone on her face and cutting her face, here's our sink/eye wash station that cost an absolute fortune to get installed. We had to cut out and like dig into the foundation of the building in order to get the plumbing over here. Yvonne made it work. Thank you, Yvonne. Here's our lathe that I have now been informed sucks, and we're getting a better one. We're getting like a CNC one now or something like that. Here's where we put all of our devices that need to be charged, like our, impact and heat gun and all that kind of stuff. The mill is definitely going. This is getting replaced by one from Tormach. That's right. That thing is going to be freaking sick. You can actually have the machine automatically change out those bits for you in the middle of the job, so you don't have to be constantly watching over it and like hand changing things, which is pretty sick. And then of course there's our CNC router, which we've had to use for both router and mill duty all this time, but now we'll be just pulling router duties. We won't have to cut out stuff like this on it, and we can more use it for like, plexi and wood and that sort of thing. If you want to find the details for any of these tools, we'll have some of the key ones like the Speedy 400 Flex, which you can learn more about at the link in the video description. Also linked in the video description, we will have Anchor, who is featuring their Power Conf as well as their C300 webcam. And thank you to them for sponsoring this video. I hope I managed to hit where the cut is on my eyebrow. You did it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this tour of the Linus Tech Tips, well, Linus Media Group studio. Oh, I haven't even talked about some of the really cool stuff, like that
about imposter syndrome today. It's something that affects a lot of content creators, but we recently launched like a beta program for like people like high potential and high performance folks from our community. And it seems like imposter syndrome kind of crops up a lot in that group. So for those of you who don't know, we have we're running like a beta program for group coaching for people who are like what we call hypos or hypers. So hypo stands for high potential. If we look at our community, there's kind of like different themes that different people need. Some people need to learn self-compassion. Some people need to learn how to forgive. Some people need to learn how to overcome procrastination. And so we have this high potential group, which there are about 13 spots left in our beta. And the group is geared towards helping people who are like sort of lacking life purpose, lacking discipline, feeling isolated, feeling like they have low self-esteem and confidence. Like this is sort of geared towards the student population. So a lot of times these people are actually like quite functional and quite successful academically. And so we're trying to sort of serve that population a little bit better. So if you guys are interested, y'all can sign up. We've got 13 spots left in our beta. Another thing that comes up, we see this a lot, especially for like the Ivy League students and stuff that we have in our community, is that they've got some imposter syndrome. So hopefully we'll dig into that, try to understand it a little bit better. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I had a little bit of a rough night. My kid woke up randomly, like super early in the morning, and came and woke me up. So didn't get quite a full night's sleep, but part of being a parent,
Yeah.
Or
How
maybe.
old is your kid?
I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Ooh, those are definitely waking up early ages.
Yeah, it can be fun, but
Yeah.
it's
Very, very fun.
And what do you go by?
Usually just by Ethan.
Ethan. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. So you want to talk about something in particular today, or?
I mean, yes and no, like kind of down to just go with the flow, but
Sure.
yeah, the main thing I guess was just imposter syndrome was a big thing. And yeah, just sort of the pressures of being a content creator and a person online.
Absolutely, man.
I just took a month off of YouTube, which was really huge and sort of like very eye-opening for me.
Yeah, so you want to just actually start off by telling us a little bit about where people can find you and what kind of content you make?
Yeah, so I do mostly YouTube and streaming stuff, just crank gameplays everywhere. I've been doing it it'll be 9 years in August. I started when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been a crazy little journey.
Yeah, sounds like a little bit longer than a little journey.
Yeah, it's been a long time, which is weird because it both seems like I haven't been doing this for a long time, and I've been doing it for an eternity.
Wow.
A little bit of both.
And so what kind of so crank gameplays, I assume you play games?
Yeah, mostly gaming stuff. I'm trying to now branch out a little bit more, just because, again, I've been doing it for almost 9 years, and I want to do something. I want to make more content that's a little more, like, creatively fulfilling. Just because after doing it for so long, it's not as much of a challenge anymore, and
Sure.
I do really like figuring things out and, being a little bit more creative.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just finished doing a channel with a friend of mine for a year. We made videos for a year and then deleted everything.
Wow.
And that was all. We made a video every single day doing just like random bullshit most of the time.
That's really cool. So it sort of adds, I guess there's sort of this timeless quality to YouTube videos. And then you guys, I guess, made it, I guess, what did you guys want to delete everything? Like,
Yeah,
or was it out of,
that
like,
was
frustration?
No, that was the goal from the beginning. The channel is called Unus Annus, which means 1 year in Latin. And so every video started with a timer of how much time was left. And so we did a year's worth of videos, and then we ended it with a 12-hour live stream where at the end of the live stream, we deleted the channel while we were streaming from it. And
Wow.
Everything went away.
That sounds like quite creatively fulfilling.
Yeah, it was really, really awesome. It was super
Awesome, man.
stressful, but it was like definitely an awakening, I think, for both of us, being like, oh wow, like doing this kind of stuff is really, really fun. And also we don't just have to do gaming stuff, like we can do other things.
That sounds really great, man. I'm it's interesting because you were saying you want to creatively branch out, but that sounds like I've never heard of anyone doing anything like that before.
Yeah, I think that's why I want to branch out more, just because that was so fulfilling, and every single day was something different. And so, yeah, it helped my brain a lot, actually.
Can I think for a second?
Yeah.
So Ethan, I'm noticing sort of like an interesting branch point already. Whereas I know a lot of times, like, people come on here and the idea is that we're going to talk about something negative, like imposter syndrome and bad emotions and burnout. But honestly, like, half the work that I do is literally has nothing to do with the negative. It's sort of like bridging people from, let's say, like the journey from being like depressed. And then, like, one day people will come into my office and then we'll sort of have this conversation about, you're not depressed anymore. You're just unhappy. And that there's a difference. Oh, thanks, son. And there's a difference between being unhappy and being depressed. And so when I think a little bit about, like, you said you took a month off and that was, it sounds like it was rejuvenating, and maybe there's some amount of imposter syndrome. There's also this sort of like personal development arc, or like personal growth arc, finding fulfillment. What is the nature of suffering? What is the nature of happiness? What is the nature of contentment? When we sort of have those kinds of conversations, we can still draw a little bit on science. So we can talk about like Maslow, or there's a psychologist named Erik Erikson. So, in the West, we have a lot of this stuff, but we also can draw a lot on kind of Eastern principles of spirituality, Stoicism, almost take a slightly more philosophical approach. And it's odd, Ethan, but like when I'm sitting across from you, there's a part of me that just kind of like feels like maybe that's a direction we need to go at some point in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
How do you
down
feel
for
about that?
anything. Yeah,
What do you wanna
I'm
talk
definitely
about?
down for that. That's the other thing, is like I don't even really know what I want to talk about necessarily. Which is also like another thing that I have a hard time with. Like, my ADHD is pretty bad.
Okay.
And so like having conversations and me having coherent thoughts is also something that I struggle with.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I ever get lost in the conversation, that's why.
Yeah, so okay. So can you just start with telling us a little bit about like how you started on YouTube and what kind of inspired you to create content?
Yeah, it was basically boredom. Me and my best friend from back home one summer, in August of 2012, we were just bored one night, and we had been watching a bunch of different YouTubers. It was mainly like PewDiePie and the Game Grumps, and we were like, huh, like you have a computer and we like messing around on camera, like let's just do this because they do it and we like video games, so why not? And that's how it started, and then eventually I just went off on my own and made videos, and yeah, it mainly stemmed from boredom, and then it grew into this passion and this thing that I really, really love to do. And I had been making random videos since I was a kid, like just like home videos with my brother, and then once YouTube came out, just like random YouTube videos here and there with some friends. And that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid, not specifically be a YouTuber, but I wanted to be an entertainer in some sense. Like I wanted to be an actor for a really long time. And then I found YouTube, and it was like, oh, it's sort of like this new wave of entertainment or whatever.
Absolutely.
And then it just kind of happened.
And so what was it that appealed to you about being an actor or entertainer?
Probably at the time when I was a kid, it was being the center of attention. I was always just pining for people's attention all the time. And that's something that I'm even like really insecure about, because looking back at like home videos and stuff like that, or even my older videos from when I first started, I feel super embarrassed by them. And like I'll show them to people because I know that's part of it. Like that's part of like, hey, look where I came from, blah, blah, blah. But it is kind of embarrassing just seeing that kid and being like, oh, you're trying so hard.
What's embarrassing about that?
I think it's that thing of like, oh, you're trying so hard to like be the center of attention, and you're being like too much and like too bombastic and crazy and stuff like that. And that's also kind of what I was being told when I was a kid too.
Sure.
Not necessarily by my family, sometimes by my family. But like I didn't do well in school, and my teachers were always like, hey, like you need to settle down, blah, blah, blah. And it was also back in a time where, you know, ADHD was still not really understood that much.
Sure.
And it was just like, oh, you don't have an actual mental thing going on. You just have too much energy and you're a disruption to the class.
Yeah, you know, Ethan, it's sometimes so sad, like how kids with ADHD, like we place value judgments on them, right? Like you're being a bad kid.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite devastating. Like I've seen this a lot, where it's like a lot of people with ADHD just feel they carry around so much like shame from early in their life that they don't even understand, because it's been so normal to them.
Yeah.
You know, that they're being told to function in an environment that their brain just isn't suited for. And it can be really rough. So I'm sorry you were in that situation, and it sounds like, you know, people weren't happy with you.
Yeah, no, and that's something that I've struggled with for a really long time. Not only like the thought of like, oh, I was a bad kid, and I know that I wasn't a bad kid or anything, but I've always felt stupid, like my entire life. And that's something that I still struggle with now. And I think it really comes from that, and comes from me being in school and not being able to learn the way that everybody else learned. And so I just thought I was stupid because I just didn't get it. And, you know, obviously, like I went to a public school, so it was, you know, 170 or 140 kids in my grade. And so it's not like the teachers can individually teach kids in the way that they learn. Like it's just not realistic. But yeah, my whole life I've sort of dealt with that and I know that I'm not stupid, but that's always been a thing in the back of my mind. Like I feel dumb all the time.
Okay.
Which I think also contributes to my imposter syndrome.
Sure. So we can talk about. So I'm finding so many different forks in the road, Ethan, and I don't know what direction to take things. So I'm going to need your help.
Yeah, and we can go anywhere.
So I think it's actually incredibly insightful for you to say, I know I'm not stupid, but I carry this feeling around. And there's a part of me that's like, wants to just explain to you, or like ask you, like, how does that work? and then even explain to you, like, this is where we go into a little bit more of like teaching mode, where, you know, I can like, because a lot of people don't understand that. It can be really confusing that, like, I know I'm not stupid, and it's kind of weird, right? Because even when you show home videos to people, you're kind of owning that insecurity. You're kind of saying, I'm not going to let the insecurity, like, I actually am confident in myself. I'm confident with how far I've come. And so showing people like home videos of the blunder years, if you really think about it, is actually a sign of like confidence. And at the same time, you feel insecure doing it, even though there's a part of you that's like, yeah, this is where I came from. I should be proud of it. Like, I've come a long way. Like, wow, like I really didn't, you know much back then. And so it's almost like you have these two opposite poles that exist within you at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that there's some value to be gained a little bit about, you know, understanding like how does that work? Because like no one teaches us, like, why does my mind do these things?
Yeah.
And if you want to, we can kind of go down that route. We can also talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, which I think it has maybe something to do with that, but I think there's more to it than that usually. Or what we can do is, you know, I can ask you questions about how you felt stupid, and then you can end up becoming emotional on stream. If that's the route, because sometimes that's what people are looking for. They're looking for like emotional catharsis as opposed to teaching. And it really, it's like, what are you in the mood for, bro?
I'm down for anything. I'll cry on stream if you want me to.
It's not about what I want, man. It's about what you want.
Let's explore that first path a little bit.
Okay. So, how do you understand? Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question. Okay, are you stupid?
No, I'm not stupid.
Why do you feel that way?
Now that's a good question. I mean, it's just something that I know. I know I'm not stupid. I'm aware that my brain just works in different ways than other people's do.
Yeah.
And when I get into I think I know I'm not stupid because I've proved to myself that I'm not stupid, because in the right environment, I can thrive. And that even happened in school, where specifically in physics, I did really well in that class because we did a lot of hands-on stuff where like the teacher showed actual examples of the way that things worked. And it was like, oh, like this is something that's being shown right in front of me, and also we were doing like hands-on stuff, and so like I could figure out how it worked, and I did really well in that class because I was in the correct environment. And so there have been a lot of things like that where it's like, oh, I know I'm not stupid because I'm actually doing well at this thing.
Yeah.
I just learn differently.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna, you know, this is gonna be tough for you, Ethan. So I'm gonna press you, okay? Because I think you're not stupid at all. I think you're incredibly insightful. I think you're a smart guy.
Thanks.
So I'm gonna ask you hard questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Are you feeling anxious if I say something like that?
No, I don't
Beautiful.
feel anxious about it at all. I'm down for anything.
Okay. So if you have proven to yourself that you're not stupid, why do you still sometimes feel stupid?
I think I feel that way because most of the time I'm not in that kind of environment where I do feel where I feel comfortable. Like a lot of times if there's like a large discussion going on in a room, I'll just stay completely silent because I'm afraid of, well, there's a few things that I'm afraid of. One, like I don't want to like embarrass myself and say something that like I don't know anything about. But two, it's another thing of like with my ADHD, like it's so hard for me to follow along, especially in group settings. And so I just like hang back and I just am sort of like a fly on the wall. I forget your original question.
Yep. No, I think it was, so that's also incredibly insightful, right? So I don't think that has anything to do with ADHD. I think I asked you a question and your mind went to a place where you were like, oh, when I'm in group settings, I asked you like, why do you sometimes feel stupid? And then you started talking about group settings. Yeah. And then you also talked about how you've essentially adapted to survive in group settings.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like that's how I interpreted what you said. But then the question still remains, in a group setting, do you feel stupid?
A lot of times I do, yeah, because
Okay.
I feel like I don't have anything to contribute most of the time, because I'm afraid and like anxious of saying something that I don't know
Yep.
about, or
Okay.
not following along correctly, whatever.
So let's be a little bit precise here, okay? So you're saying that you feel afraid or anxious because you don't have something to contribute.
yeah,
Okay. So I'm going to toss a hypothesis to you that it's the other way around.
okay,
It is your fear and anxiety and insecurity that causes you to conclude that you don't have anything to contribute. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
that makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting, right? Because we say like,
Yeah.
oh, I have nothing worth saying, therefore I am afraid or anxious or I shouldn't speak up. But it's actually the other way around. It's really tricky, subtle.
Yeah.
Because our mind always makes us think that it's logical. But I actually think the root of that is your insecurity. I'd guess that you have a lot to contribute. I don't think that you randomly become stupid in groups of people. Now, there
Yeah.
may be like a certain amount of ADHD where you're not able to attend to what everyone is saying. Like, that's totally fine. But I think that you probably have a lot to contribute, but it's that your insecurity becomes active in that situation. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's something that I've sort of realized in the past like year or so, is that and I think me being on YouTube has actually made it a lot worse.
Yep.
But I've realized that I'm way more of an insecure person than I thought I was. And there's like a lot that I like hold back, and there's a lot that I don't open up to a ton of people. I think like for me to like truly open up and talk about stuff that I am insecure about, like that's a really hard thing for me to do, and like a lot of times I will just hold back because I'm insecure about it.
Okay. Ethan, I'm going to need a minute. Can I have a minute?
Oh yeah.
I just love what, like, oh man. Okay. I think I'm finally getting a sense of maybe how we can take this conversation today. Okay.
Cool.
I just need a second to make sure we can, if I can try to tie this together. Okay.
Cool.
So. Okay.
I'm excited to get into it.
Oh, buddy. It's going to be walking a tightrope. Oh, yeah. Okay. Here's my proposal. Now, the downside is going to be that I may be talking more than you. So you got to let me know if that rubs you the wrong way. Okay.
It does
so
not.
We're going to start with your insecurity. We're going to start by understanding what is so, when we say the insecurity activates in a particular environment, it's going to start very, very simple with principles of not quite psychology. This is really more of like yoga and meditation about the way that the mind works. So what I want to hypothesize to you, and we'll explain this in more detail, is that you're like a confident, secure person, generally speaking, okay? But that in some circumstances, your mind activates insecurity.exe. And then like you become like this person that you used to be. Yeah. And like, even though you're successful and people like you have these like, really risky, broad creative pursuits. Like you are the first content creator I have ever heard of that intentionally deletes a year of their life and what they put in. It is so incredibly wild and courageous. It's so authentic and it's so ballsy, right? That's like, look at the scrotum on that guy. So we know that there's this huge, we know that there's this you who's like grown a lot. The problem is that like you have this thing that you carry with you, this insecurity that like is always at the back of your mind. You're stupid. And sometimes it becomes more active. And when it becomes active, it shapes your thoughts. It says, oh, like I shouldn't speak up here. So we're going to start by sort of explaining how that works in the mind. The second thing that we're going to do is segue that into YouTube and imposter syndrome. So once we understand what that insecurity thing is, we're going to take a look at sort of like science and social media and things like that and see what YouTube and social media does to this basic psychology you have and how that results in imposter syndrome. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how opening up is difficult. And the crux here, and I'm really building a house of cards that could come tumbling down, okay? So bear with me. So this is where like we're going to talk a little bit about like the more that essentially YouTube inflates both your success and your insecurity, because they both rise together, which I know is weird, but that's really what we see. That makes opening up difficult because like as you start to become a YouTuber and you start to see that there's two Ethans, right? There's the Ethan who's like a badass who's been YouTubing for 9 years and is confident and knows that they're worth their weight in gold. And then there's like this other Ethan that's like, well, what if everyone just thinks I'm an idiot, and if I open my mouth, they're going to think I'm stupid, and it's all going to come crumbling down.
Yeah.
And it's that dichotomy which makes it hard for you to open up, because like, what if they see the other one? What if it actually is that Ethan? Like, then what? And so then what happens is you start to like be inauthentic. You start to hide yourself. You start to, like you're doing like when you were a little kid and you wanted to be loud and you wanted people to like see who you are. I don't think that's like quite, attention is one thing. I think you have another way to think about it is I think you genuinely have something that you want to share with the world. And so the more it makes opening up difficult, the more you're closing yourself off with like what you show to the world. And this is where we get to the personal growth part, which is like we sort of end the journey with sort of understanding that like, if you want to grow as a person and if you want the courage to take those creative pursuits, you have to show people the ugly side of you. You have to be willing to show everything that you have to like the world. And if you can do that, then I think you're going to find you're going to start creating more content that's creatively fulfilling.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
It sounds like a great plan.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the insecurity. Okay. So let's start by understanding this kind of thing. So we're going to start with the insecurity. So when you feel, so does it kind of make sense that the insecurity is like a program that activates in your mind and kind of takes over your thought process?
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of like what situation, like, can you give us like share a specific example of like when you felt like, stupid.exe was activating?
Whew. There's so many examples. Yeah, I mean, like, I like any conversation, honestly.
Okay.
There's so many times where it happens. If somebody is, I don't know. Basically, if somebody's talking about anything other than like YouTube stuff or like cameras or gymnastics, I used to be a gymnast. Anything other than that, it's pretty much like out of my wheelhouse, if I'm being honest. And so there's a lot of times where I feel like I can't weigh in on stuff. And to give you some history, like I was a gymnast from when I was 8 until 17. I worked out 5 days a week, 3.5 to 4 hours a day. And then when I was 15, I started YouTube. And so I was splitting my time between YouTube, school, and gymnastics. And I didn't really have any social life at all. And then I got really shitty grades, and my mom was like, you have to stop gymnastics or gymnastics or YouTube. And so I chose to continue YouTube. And
can you tell me about that conversation?
Yeah, it was my sophomore year, I think. End of sophomore year, my mom found out that I got 2 D's on my finals. I got like a B, multiple C's, and 2 D's on my finals. And she like freaked out about it. Because basically all I cared about was YouTube and gymnastics. I didn't care about school, which looking back, like, why should I have cared about school? Because it was an environment that made me feel uncomfortable in so many different ways. And so she got really upset about it, and she was like, okay, you have to take school more seriously. You can't be doing all of this stuff. You're juggling way too much. You have to pick two of these. One of them has to be school.
And how did you feel?
That was the first time I ever had a panic attack. I like completely broke down. Like I was like it was really, really bad. Like I was like screaming, crying, because I just didn't know how to handle that. Because that, I think it was a couple things. One, because I loved both of these things so much, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I was about to choose YouTube, and gymnastics was like this huge thing. Like it really shaped who I am as a person. And knowing that I was about to give that up just like completely like shattered me.
Okay. So what was so devastating about, because I'm going to use the word sentence.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like sentencing to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm envisioning you like almost being like in a courtroom where there's like your mom with a gavel and she's like,
Yeah. It's kind of what it was like.
Which child will you execute?
Yeah.
What was that? What caused the panic attack, for lack of a better term? I know it's kind of a weird question because
I think that you just phrased it really well. It was like I'm killing myself off, like this version of myself, and I have to choose which person to point the gun at. And like that was something, especially at that age too, like I just didn't know how to handle that. And I like looking back, I solved that problem really well. I think I was like, okay, well, let's look at my future. Like if you're going to be like a career gymnast, like your career kind of stops when you're like 25, 26 because your body can't handle it anymore. So really, like, where can you go from there? After that, like, maybe you get some sponsorships, but then you kind of like become a coach and that's kind of it. And then I was like, but with this other thing, like maybe I could go more into film and like blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay, this one's better for my future.
Okay. Beautifully said. Okay, so this is what, oh crap. So I would love, Ethan, boy, man, this is one of those interviews where I really wish we had like 5 hours because there's so much to dig into here. Because
Yeah.
I think there's more to it. So I'm going to just like jump to the punchline here. And the punchline is a hypothesis because we don't really know. But I think there's another element, right? It's not just where do you point the gun? It's also like what you are, like, who is your mom? So what I want you to think about for a second is what is your mom? So your mom is asking you to point the gun. Mm-hmm. But she's also asking you to not only kill off a part of yourself, what is she asking you to become?
Mm. Yeah, so she wants me to become a good student is at the end of the day. She was
That's
like,
what she wants you to become. So she's asking you to become a student. What is she sentencing you to?
I mean, she's basically asking me to like choose the version of myself, to pick the version of myself that I want to be, I guess. And then
Nope. She's not.
She's not.
No. She's asking you to make the choice that you don't want to be. She sent it because are you going to be a good student?
No, I still was not a good student after that.
Right? And I think you understood that. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just like getting rid of gymnastics or YouTube. It's like forcing you to like, here's like, so there's two Ethans, right? There's the Ethan who can be proud of what they accomplish. Mm-hmm. There's like the YouTube Ethan and the gymnast Ethan. And I like, those are good Ethans.
Yeah.
Tell me about Ethan the student.
I mean, I just didn't care at all. So
Sure.
there was a few reasons why I didn't care. Well, so number one reason was because YouTube and gymnastics was just everything. That's where my passion was. I wasn't passionate about anything in school. Like I wasn't learning anything that I was interested in. And then the environment that I was in was, I went to like the best public school in the area or whatever, and so they were really proud of the people that went to their school, and it was always like, oh, like all 99.9% of our students going to college and like blah 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 blah, and like being in that environment and knowing that so many people around me were these like grade A students and like were going on to these big universities, and again me being like, well shit, like I feel stupid all the time and I'm getting bad grades, and I'm like I didn't feel like, and I think that this is true for a lot of kids, like I didn't feel like I was a part of the school in a lot of ways, because I didn't do anything at school. Like I wasn't a part of any clubs. I didn't do any sports through the school. I went to school when I had to. I left immediately. I didn't hang out with anybody because I didn't have time, because I was too busy doing YouTube and gymnastics. Which also, looking back, is like I was a really, really passionate and dedicated kid to what I cared about. And I think that in the environment that I was in, like that was kind of hard to find, actually. And I remember one of the proudest moments, I think, was a couple years after I graduated and I was doing YouTube, and I was working full time as a manager at a restaurant, and I was making 2 videos every day. And my dad told me that he's never met somebody that works as hard as I do. And like that like that made me just like explode.
What does that mean?
Just like hearing that one at all, after I just kind of felt like I was a fuck up for a really long time because I wasn't traditionally doing well, because I got shitty grades and I didn't participate in school, and hearing somebody be like, seeing somebody recognize how hard I worked, and especially that being my dad, was just like really, really huge. And my dad and I have a really great relationship, and he's someone that I really, really, really look up to. And so hearing that come from him, just, it was really, really big for me.
Big in what way?
Just really validating that, like, the time that I had spent working as hard as I did, because at the time I was working full time at the restaurant, so 40 plus hours a week. I was waking up at like 4:30 or 5 a.m. every day to record videos before work, and then I would get back. It was very unhealthy at the time, but I would get back from work and then be editing until like midnight or 1, and I would do that like almost every day for a really long time. And so just having somebody validate that and say like, hey, I recognize how hard you're working, but also on top of that, like, you are one of the hardest working people that I know. And it was also, I don't remember if he actually did say it, but I mean, it kind of goes along with what he said anyway. It was just like having somebody say, I'm proud of you, was just like really, really big for me. And I don't know. I think everybody loves that, having somebody validate, you know, what they're doing, and having
Sure.
somebody say, hey, I'm proud of you.
Don't, Ethan, don't do the mistake of, you know, I didn't like it when you compared yourself to everyone there. I think don't cheapen your experience and how significant it was for you by just saying, you know, everyone likes to be told they're proud. Like, I don't think that's what happened there. You didn't just get told you were proud. So here's how I'd understand your situation. So like your mom like was so there's 2 Ethans, right? There's the Ethan who's like passionate and like good at stuff, and then there's the Ethan who's like sort of a failure. and you say that you didn't care about school and that's why you did bad, that's another thing where I would encourage you to see if it's the other way around. Because it's really hard to be a kid who feels like you're stupid, who's surrounded by, and you're giving us a lot here, right? So like, let's just think about, I'm just going to tell you what I heard. Like, you're a kid who knows, like, you don't know you've got ADHD, but like, you just know that this is the best public school and that people are going to go off to college and they get all A's, and then there's you. And what's wrong with you, Ethan? Why can't you get good grades? Because you're stupid. You're a stupid kid. And so like, it's hard to be invested in something that you don't believe that you can do.
Yeah.
I don't think that I don't think you did bad because you didn't care. I think you probably, when you were 5 and 6 and 7, you tried really, really hard and your mind did not comply.
Yeah.
And so it's one thing to like, so it's almost protective to stop caring, because if you did care about school, what would that mean for you?
I think that if I did care, like, that probably would have fucked me up way more.
Absolutely. Right? So not caring is not the reason you didn't do good at school. Not caring is the adaptation for not doing good at school. And then here's your mom, and she's saying, here's the gun, you pick which one goes. But it's more than that, because it's not that you're just getting rid of one. It's that she's forcing you to be stupid, Ethan. She's like, here's this kid that is like bright and talented and is a good gymnast and is doing well on YouTube and is passionate about this stuff. And she's like, I'm going to take one of those away and I'm going to force you to be crappy Ethan 50% of the time. And now we get to this story with your dad, because it's not just like, oh, like everyone enjoys being validated. Oh yeah, my dad tells me I'm proud, makes me feel good. Like, I completely agree. Like, you know, everyone feels good, but I think it's actually like, it's so much like, it brings me to tears, man. Like, you know, like that kid is like, you know, they're struggling hard, right? Like it hasn't been easy for you. And to have like your dad recognize that, like, you're not dumb. Like, it's just, you're like working so hard. It's like immense. It becomes incredibly powerful. It's not just being told, sorry, I'm getting myself. I'm just thinking about like,
I was going to be the one crying.
I told you I was going to talk a lot today, so I'm going to do the crying too. But I think it's like, it feels really significant to me, because it's this moment where you were seen, right? It's this moment where you were like appreciated. And this is going to all tie back into imposter syndrome and like what I was saying at the beginning about, or not beginning, but earlier, where like, I think what you need to do to create is to like let people see you. You know, like you need to give people the chance to like do what your dad, like you need to put yourself out there, right? And let people see you. And then in terms of imposter syndrome, there's also something very clear about, you know, being in this straight A school or whatever and being the one kid with D's and whatnot. So like maybe you felt like an imposter. I think there are a couple of themes which we can touch on. And does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah, why don't you just take a second and then let me know when we're ready to move on, or if you have questions or want to try to recap.
It's very interesting thinking about it in the way that you presented it, of like my mom forcing me to kill off a version of myself. And like, I also recognize that it was like my mom having to make a really hard decision too.
Sure.
Because it was bad for me, like, to be juggling all of that stuff. And like, I looking back, I don't think like my mom was the bad guy or anything like that, but it really was her being like, all right, like, I almost, in a way, wish she would have just said, okay, no more gymnastics or no more YouTube, because I feel like not having a choice in that circumstance, like me having the weight of the decision not be on me, I think would have been so much easier. And like, and again, I think that's why I freaked out, was like, I have to make this choice.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So when you talk about a panic attack, I think it's not surprising, because I think that like in that moment, your mind understood like what future Like there's a door, the door to your bright future is being closed, and you're being like put on this path of like academia and like failure, and like it makes perfect sense to me that you had a panic attack. And I also want to say, like, as a disclaimer here, so sometimes when we talk about parents, we make it seem like they're evil. I don't think your mom was evil or bad by any means. I think like parents do what they think is best for their kids. And sometimes it's inevitable, but like we're going to psychologically traumatize our children no matter how much we love them. And that's just the nature of life. It's the nature of our life. Seriously, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
You know, and so the parents did the best that they could. And they also, I'm sure that your mom did a lot of wonderful stuff for you too. And so, you know, I just want to be clear that I don't think she was a bad person or anything. It's just like, you know, her kid is doing too much and they're failing out of school, and like no one know, like, you know, you being a YouTuber wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's actually, you know, so your mom was just doing what she thought was best. And sometimes it's the little things that can actually be like psychologically very difficult. So now we're going to go to, can we move on? Phase 2? Okay. So we talked a little bit about feelings. So here's Ethan. Okay. And then, so here's like, there's like this whole complex of gymnast. Oh shit. So you have to excuse me. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm a physician, which means that I have terrible handwriting. All right. Okay. So this is the Ethan, right? So, and then there's school. So here you are at the age sophomore year, and then your mom has this conversation, and then you have this panic attack.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then what are you feeling in the panic attack? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was the first time that I'd ever felt like overwhelming emotions like that.
Yep.
I remember I grabbed onto a lamp that we had that had like three sort of prongs that went out to hold the lampshade, and I just grabbed that and I just squeezed it as hard as I could, and it was metal. And like that's all I could do was just like squeeze the lamp while I was lying on the floor.
Okay. And then
that's kind of all I remember, honestly.
Yep. And then you remember, like, do you remember when you kind of reconstituted? Like you said, like you made this calculated decision and you kind of calmed down quickly. Was that the same day or next day or what?
It was the same day. It was over the course of like a couple hours, I think, of like actually calming down, because I just kind of like laid on the floor and like hyperventilated for a while. And I remember my mom, my dad was at work, and she called my dad, and she was in the other room, but I could hear her. And she was like, "Hey, I need you to come home. Like, I just had this conversation with Ethan and he's freaking out, and like it's really, really bad, and I need you to come home." Okay. And I remember like by the time that my dad got home, I was like winding down. I was still probably like hyperventilating and like sobbing a little bit, but like the main part of it was sort of over.
Yeah. So as you start to rationalize, where does that emotion go?
I mean, it sort of went into, it was more like analytical and me being like, okay, here are my options, and just sort of like in my brain sort of lining everything out of like, I was kind of doing like, like the Doctor Strange, like infinite universe kind of thing, where I was just like, all right, how many circumstances can I make in my brain with the options that I have, and what is the best outcome? Okay, I'm going to choose this outcome. I was sort of doing that kind of thing. Okay. And so I think rationalizing it actually probably helped me calm down a lot as soon as I started to think about it that way.
Sure. Makes perfect sense. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick scenario. Normally I run through this in a little bit more detail, but we're just going to get to the... So like this is the example that I like to use. So let's say I'm walking down the street with my 5-year-old, and she sees a dog, and she tries to pet it, and the dog bites her. What happens to her emotionally?
She's gonna be traumatized, and she's probably gonna cry.
Yep, right, so she's crying. And then I kind of calm her down a little bit, and then I ask her if she wants ice cream. Right, so I distract her. Hey, do you want ice cream? And she's like, yes, definitely. 5 minutes later, she's eating ice cream and she's happily talking to me about princesses. Make sense?
Yeah.
Crying emotion is gone, right? What happens the next time she sees a dog?
She's gonna probably get afraid that she's gonna get bitten again.
Okay. So where is that emotion coming from?
It's coming from the trauma that she had with the dog in the past.
Perfect. Right? So now I want you to understand this. So now, why is that emotion? So I want you to think about it this way. So this emotion gets stored into our unconscious mind. Does that make sense? And then what causes the emotion to like cross over into the conscious mind?
By seeing the thing that made her feel that feeling.
Very good. So let's think about like a triggering environment. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so like, I know this sounds kind of weird. I keep on insisting on using this example, but if you go to, let's say, a hotel, let's say you're traveling, Ethan, and you walk into the public restroom of the hotel, and how do you know how to operate a toilet that you've never seen before?
Because most toilets are the same.
Exactly. So where does that knowledge about the toilet come from?
My past.
Absolutely. And what causes you like so I know this sounds kind of weird, but like are you thinking about flushing the toilet before you see the toilet?
No.
Right? So like there's this very simple principle of the mind that it scans, and this is something that the intellect does, or the buddhi. It scans your environment and it kind of says like, okay, what is the appropriate experience that we need to activate to help us deal with this situation? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Works for toilets, works for trauma. It's the same thing. It's a very fundamental idea of mind. So then the question becomes, so now you say to yourself, so now we're going to kind of like reconceptualize this a little bit, okay? So you say to yourself, I know I'm smart. Right? Damn it. Can I do this? Okay. Looks like I just can't do this. Okay, whatever. So you know you're smart, and yet there are times where you feel stupid. So how does that work? So we have our manas, which is our emotional mind, our ahamkara, which is our ego, and our buddhi, which is our intellect. And there are certain environments. So you essentially have a stored emotion of stupidness. And like even though it's not active most of the time, like you're smart, like logically, like your intellect has concluded that you're a worthwhile dude. Yeah. But essentially you have this thing called a samskar, which is essentially that balled up, undigested emotional energy of feeling stupid. And there are certain times in your life where your brain is scanning the environment, like when you're with a group of people, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is when we're stupid. Because if I had to guess, I'm sure we could find lots of instances of you sitting in a classroom with lots of people talking about stuff that you may not know what they're talking about, and the teacher calls on you and you feel really, really dumb.
Yeah.
And like, when you feel really, really dumb, like, where does that feeling go? How long do you feel dumb for when you're in that classroom?
I mean, I think that feeling was just kind of always there. Like the dread of being called on, because I was like, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to know what we're talking about, and I'm not going to be able to contribute. So it just kind of was constantly there.
So let me ask you, Ethan, when you are in a group of people who are talking about something, does your mind tell you, I don't really know what we're talking about, I'm not going to be able to contribute?
Yeah, it kind of does a lot of the times.
So like, it's weird, right? It's like the same damn thoughts that you used to have in the classroom, you now have in groups of people.
Is that why I still have nightmares about high school?
So yes. Absolutely. So nightmares. So now we get to okay. Great point, because this is a deviation that we haven't talked about. So this is what I want you to understand. Okay. So in our emotional mind, you have this experience of sadness, feeling stupid. Actually, let's call it feeling stupid, not sadness. Okay. And then what happens is that like your mind distracts yourself in some way, or you use rationalization, and then this thing goes dormant. Okay. Let's say this is the line of your conscious mind. Okay. And it gets stored as this thing called a samskar, which is like this ball of undigested emotional energy, which then gets recalled at particular times. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. And so now the question is like, then how do we ever get rid of this? Right? Because like it's kind of interesting. So this is where, you know, now if you were to be in an experience where you felt stupid, what would you do what would you do? I know it sounds kind of weird, but we've talked about when you were 15 and when you were like 8. But like now if something bad happens to you, like what's something bad that's happened to you recently? Do you mind sharing anything? It can be anything. Anything that
bad.
It could be even a tiny thing, like any negative emotion that you've had recently.
I mean, does being sick count?
Not really.
I'm trying to think of any. And like
Yeah, I know
bad...
I'm kind of putting you on the spot in an unprompted
No, it's
way.
totally fun.
And it just fell apart, but...
I was moving out of my old apartment, and because I just moved kind of recently, and I still had a bunch of shit there that I had to deal with, and it was just super stressful for me to have to like go back there and deal with stuff that was still there.
And what did you do with those emotions? I know it sounds like kind of a weird question because we don't even realize what we do with the emotions, but like...
I tend to just kind of like hold on to them, and not like I'm gonna be upset all day, but I just kind of like, it's almost like I'm absorbing them and just like, yeah, okay.
Yep, that's okay. So we're gonna have to teach you a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what tends to happen as we get older. So if we look at like the psychiatry and psychology, right? Most of the time, like the money's in childhood. And the reason for that is because as we grow older, our ability to process emotions improves. Like if I'm walking down the street and I get bit by a dog, like what kind of thoughts what's my initial reaction?
I mean, at least for me, if I get bit by I'm probably just gonna get like upset and like angry.
Yep. And then what are you
rather than cry?
Sure. And then what happens?
And you just walk away, I guess.
Sure. Right. So like you kind of walk away, and okay, maybe this is what we need to work on a little bit. So like this is also where like, you know, most adults will do some amount of processing, right? Like, so in the same way, so we can talk about this in terms of stupidity. Actually, we have a good example of this where you sort of rationally look at your situation and you kind of say like, oh, actually, like, I'm not stupid. I just feel stupid right now. But like, I actually have a lot that I contribute to people, et cetera, et cetera. Does that sort of make sense? Mm-hmm. So there's this process of like actually digesting or metabolizing emotions. So this is what psychotherapy is. So when you go and you talk to a counselor and you like talk about your feelings, it's kind of weird. Like, how does that help people? Like, what is the mechanism through which talking about the bad stuff in your life actually like helps you in any way, shape, or form? Because a lot of times people will think about the bad things in their life. It doesn't help them at all. It just makes them feel worse. So there's actually this process of metabolizing and digesting your negative emotions. And the more that you do that, the more you're kind of free of those samskars. So if I get bit by a dog and I kind of like process it, then like I'm not going to get triggered by the dog anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure if we like tunnel down enough, I can ask you enough open-ended questions that, you know, it's hard to lead you in the right direction. But I'm sure if you look in your life, you'll see that there are times where you felt emotionally bad and you like did the work of talking it through with a friend, or you like went for a long hike, or like you did something, right? You didn't just shove it aside. You didn't stick it under the rug, but you actually spent some time grieving. So grieving is another good example of this emotional processing thing. Yeah. Where like some people don't grieve and then they stay stuck. Does that make sense? Because that
Yeah.
ball of emotional energy, that Samskar, is just living down there. And grieving is how we like get over it. Psychotherapy is how we get over it. Okay? So let me just think about where I wanted to go with this. Any questions about this? Does this make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And it's making me think about like how because specifically for anger, when I get angry, I've learned how to deal with that. And I rarely ever get angry, but like when I get really mad or frustrated now, I'll go and work out or I'll go running because it's just like a way for me to get a lot of energy out really quick. And that's sort of how I process that. But I don't have that for any other emotion.
Yep, that's very, very well said. So the other thing, beautiful, Ethan, so good. Okay, so a couple of important principles. Your body and your mind are connected, right? So there's like a pseudoscientific practice called tapping, or the emotional freeing technique, which now actually has a little bit of data behind it, which is like a technique that people use for trauma, which actually now has clinical trials that show it's like it actually does something. So the idea is that like it's kind of weird because it sounds super pseudoscientific. And what people do is like there are these people who are tappers. And what they literally do is they just like tap on parts of your body to like free the pent up emotions.
Kind of like acupuncture or something?
Sort of. I think acupuncture uses a whole different modality, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the point here though is that like physical, and we know that, for example, the diagnostic criteria for anxiety includes muscle tension. So there's clearly a connection between your body and your mind, and you can actually process emotions physically if you want to. That's a completely valid, doesn't have to be psychotherapy. You can actually go and like hike and climb mountains, and that will help you like process your emotions. The other interesting way that the mind processes emotions, which is I think what your mind has learned how to do, is dreams and nightmares. So every time you have a nightmare about that, I know it's unfortunate, but like my hope is that you're digesting a little bit, and there are actually particular techniques that we can do. I can walk you through those. Maybe that's going to be our meditation for the day at the end of the day, about how to like think about nightmares and how to like work with them a little bit so that like you sort of use that nightmare to like do the emotional processing and let it go. Because your body and your mind are going to do whatever they can to heal. Like if you get a cut, it's just going to try to heal. And your mind does the same thing. It does the best that it can. So it'll, and so if you have nightmares about it, how often do you have nightmares, by the way?
I mean, I don't have nightmares all that often. The like school ones, the like stress dream kind of things, I'll have like maybe once every few weeks or once a month, maybe.
Yeah. So I think that's just like your brain is like, you still have that pent up emotion. I know it sounds kind of weird, but in the nightmare, when you're in the nightmare, is the nightmare real?
No.
Really?
Or like, is like what's happening something that actually happened? Is that what you're asking?
Is your experience of it real?
I mean, yeah, because I'll wake up and feel stressed.
Yep. So like, and even then, like the emotions that you feel in a nightmare, are they real?
Yeah.
It's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
But absolutely. So I think like this is and if we think about like this emotional catharsis, and when people like come into my office and they start crying, like what we're doing is bringing those emotions back into the conscious mind so that we can experience them, process them, and let them go. And so I think that your mind has just learned how to do this through a nightmare because you don't know how to do it other ways. Or maybe you haven't, I don't know if you see a therapist or not, but like, that's another way. I would suspect that if you start going to therapy, I'm assuming that you don't already, but that if you start
I just stopped going to therapy, actually. I just like took a break because doing stuff over Zoom every week, like I couldn't like get into the right like mindset every week. And so until I can go back in person, we took a little bit of a break, but I just stopped going like a few weeks ago.
Good. I think taking a break from therapy is like important too. Like it should be part of your vacation. But anyway, so hopefully you can kind of work on some of those things there. But I think it sort of makes sense to me that you have nightmares about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So just to kind of summarize, so Ethan, do you mind just sharing with me like what you've taken away from the conversation so far, like key points that?
Yeah. I mean, the sort of realization of like having to like kill a version of me off, I think has like affected me a lot more than I initially thought. And like, and I think I get this from my dad, but like I very much don't process my emotions. Like something will happen to me and I'll just kind of brush it off. And I also just like will kind of roll over for people too. And that's
What does that
sort
mean?
Well, just like I don't know. I don't like stand up for myself all that much. And also I don't know how to say no to anybody. Which is something that I've been sort of like working on. And I think that's part of my insecurity is like, I don't want, this is something I've actually talked to my therapist a lot about, is that I don't want people to think that I'm an asshole. And so if somebody asks me to do something, I'll just like kind of bend over backwards for them and be like, oh yeah, of course. Cause I don't want them to think I'm a dick.
Okay, I'm curious. Did you feel pressured to come on here today?
No.
Okay. Would you tell me if you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause
I was very excited.
Okay. Because I would hate to, you know, have you bend over backwards for,
No.
you know. Okay. So really, I'm glad that. So now I'm going to give you a choice. So what I'm actually hearing, Ethan, is that the biggest thing that was helpful for you was sort of this realization about your mom and sort of being, you know, forced to. I'm looking for the right word. Amputate a part of yourself.
Yeah.
And so now, you know, I've sketched out this beautiful plan, but I'm wondering if we should actually abandon it and just maybe like dig for a couple more of those gems. Like, what do you think? We can go down our standard track of, okay, here's the way that some scars work. This feeling of insecurity is essentially like pent up emotions from these past times that then activate. We can now move on to like YouTube and think a little bit about how that entire process is exacerbated by social media. Then we can talk about how opening up is difficult. And then we can sort of talk about, you know, becoming your best self. Or we can dig for gems. What do you want to do?
We can do either of those.
Your time, bro. I'm going to force you to choose. Oh, shit. Right. No, I'm not. No, I can't. Oh, fuck. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Ethan, I didn't mean to.
Okay. Oh God.
Wait. You don't have to choose.
You choose. You choose.
Okay. Do you want to choose?
No, not really.
Okay, I will choose for you. Okay, let's stick with our original thing.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, Ethan. Oh
No,
God,
that's
please.
very funny.
I didn't mean to. All right. So let's talk about YouTube. So you say that you suffer from imposter syndrome, or maybe something like that. What do you mean by that?
So definitely over the past year, because the channel that I was doing with a friend of mine like really boosted my career a lot and boosted my own channel and everything. And so I just sort of feel like just kind of standard imposter syndrome of like the things that I have I don't deserve, or I think a lot about like, why am I in this scenario? And like, you know, a lot of people in my life, especially over the past year, have had really shitty things happen to them. And here I am, like, you know, on paper, like living the dream in Los Angeles. And so it's a lot of like, why am I this person that's experiencing this? And there's a lot of guilt that I feel with the success that I have, and I don't feel that I deserve it, basically.
Do you feel like you don't deserve it from like a cosmic sense, or do you feel like people haven't figured out that you don't make good content yet?
I think it's the latter. It's
okay.
In my mind, like, there's so many other people that make way better stuff than I do. Like, I don't think that I'm particularly interesting, or that and again, this is something that I'm working on with my therapist, of like, I don't feel like I'm worthy of people's time most of the time.
So I'm noticing a couple of different things, and I wouldn't call all of them imposter syndrome, okay? So can I try to tease apart, untangle this ball of yarn? So when I think about imposter syndrome, so here's, for better or for worse, I feel like I'm understand it quite well now. We work with a lot of streamers, and we have like a program with Twitch where we support content creators. And so one of the things that when I think about imposter syndrome, I'm going to use sort of this Eastern kind of conception of it as well. So we have an internal sense of self, right? And this is the way that you view yourself. And we have the way that the world treats us. And so the way that I view myself is different from the way that the world treats me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, though, actually, so let's go back to your dad for a second. So there are times where like harmony is built when these two things are even. So I think like the significance of like your dad like appreciating you for who you are is like you knew deep down that you were working really, really hard and you were trying. And so you had this view of yourself, but what did the world think of you?
That I was a failure.
Right? So, but like the world kept on telling you were a failure. Does waking up at 4:30 in the morning, making YouTube videos, going to work, and then coming back home and editing them, if I describe that to someone, like what adjectives would you use to describe that person?
Like hardworking and dedicated and probably successful.
Passionate, right?
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect between your internal sense and what the world is telling you. That can be very devastating for people. And then here comes your dad, and he's a signal from the outside world that aligns with like your passion and your dedication. And so it can feel really good. So in that situation, your self-esteem is up here, the world is treating you down here. And so that's kind of feels bad, man, right? Mm-hmm. Imposter syndrome is this. Mm-hmm. It's when you have a sense of yourself, like you're just like an ordinary guy, like you're a 24-year-old Ethan. Mm-hmm. There's some things you're good at, some things you're not great at. And the world is like, oh my God, it's Ethan. He's so great. Like, look at this cool stuff he's doing all the time, man. Oh my God, I love Ethan. And then you're like, wait a minute, hold on a second.
Yeah.
So what I see in imposter syndrome, and I see it a lot at places, so I teach at Harvard Medical School, and like I see it a lot there, bizarrely. And you'd think that like, like what's the correlation between success and imposter syndrome? And generally speaking, the more successful people are, the more that they feel imposter syndrome. And essentially what happens is like, generally speaking, our internal sense of self and external sense of self tend to like stick with each other. So if you think about a standard person, it's like, oh, I'm a high school student, I feel terrible. And then you like become a freshman in college. Then once you're a freshman in college, you feel like a nobody, like you're a freshman, you're a noob. Mm-hmm. And then you go back home for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And then you hang out with people who are 1 or 2 years younger than you. Yeah. And then then you feel like a big swinging dick, Yeah. It's like, look at all these high school plebs. And like, I'm in college now, bitches. And so there's kind of this weird, like this slow growth, right? And then you finish high school and then you go back and like you do a career panel for like high school. You finish college and then you get a job and then you're like 24 and you go back and you like do some career panel at the guidance office or whatever. And there are all these 21-year-olds and like you're a 24-year-old and you're like paying your own rent and then you like feel like someone, right? But you're the most junior person at the company. So you don't feel like much there. So generally speaking, there's like an even sense of like societal respect with like an internal sense of value, because that's the way that we're sort of designed. We're not designed to like inherit vast amounts of success over brief periods of time, because things like social media, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but 10,000 years ago, you couldn't blow up in your tribe.
Yeah.
There's only like so big that you could get, right? And so like, sure, like you could maybe like you single-handedly killed a tiger and then everyone's like, yay. And then you're like, yay, look at how awesome I am. And then like 15 people think you're great.
Yeah.
And so our brains are just not designed, like the concept of blowing up was not technologically possible in the environment. Like you go look at a tribe of like a pack of deer, right? Yeah. Like how much can their social status change?
Yeah, very little.
Right? And so like enter YouTube. where suddenly now we have these things where like people get elevated a lot. So have you heard of a company called Goldman Sachs? You know, Goldman? Yeah, okay. So like I also work with a fair number of people at Goldman. And like Goldman is sort of like, it's like a platinum tier investment bank. It's where everyone wants to go. They're like super famous, super rich, whatever. And so we see a ton of imposter syndrome before, like when I'm working with a 22-year-old who's applying to be in Goldman. He's like at the top of his class. He's the most competitive. He feels really good about himself. And then when he lands at Goldman, within 6 months, he's got imposter syndrome. Because then when he introduces himself to people and he's like, oh, I work at Goldman. And then everyone's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then he's like, but wait a minute, because he's like the most junior kid on the totem pole. So every day when he goes to work, he feels like clueless. And here he is getting all this external respect.
Yeah.
So bizarrely, what I see in imposter syndrome is like when there's a quick elevation, the imposter syndrome gets worse because then you're kind of confused because everyone's treating you like you're the best thing since sliced bread. But like, I know this sounds kind of weird, but like you still shit the same every morning.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And so I definitely see that. And I think that like basically is if you do like self-reflective work and stuff like that, we can talk about spirituality and stuff. That's one thing. But I'm also detecting something else, which I don't think is imposter syndrome, which is sort of the sense of worthiness. What's fair? Do I deserve this? And I don't really get the sense that I feel like that's a little bit more almost like spiritual in nature. What do you think?
Yeah, why is that different from imposter syndrome? Of like, because you sort of described it as like other people saying like, oh, you're hot shit, and really you're just a normal dude. But how is that sort of different from feeling like, oh, like I have this stuff and I don't feel worthy? Like, why me?
Yeah, so the reason I'd say that that's different is one has to do with a comparison. It may not be different, right? So it may be the same. So I'm kind of proposing to you. But what I'm like, especially when you talked about like other, like, so if you ask, why am I successful and other people are not, that doesn't have to come with imposter syndrome. That I think is a really, really important question from like a spiritual and karmic perspective. Like, why do you have the life that you have? And imposter syndrome is about sort of like being afraid that one day everyone's going to wake up and like start to think that like you make crappy content.
They know. They figured it out.
Right? So being afraid of them figuring it out is different from like understanding like, Ethan, why were you given the gifts that you were given? You know, you say you're ADHD and you have struggles and things like that. Totally get it. But like, I think you've discovered that you are brilliant. Right? I think
that is not a word that I would use to describe myself. But I'm also very, very bad at giving myself any credit at all or saying anything nice about myself.
Yeah. So I think that feeling of unworthiness can grow into imposter syndrome. But I think that has deeper roots, dude. Because I think you were taught you were unworthy from a very young age. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that, and it's so interesting because I don't feel that at all from my family, because my family has always been they've always supported like everything that I've ever done, and like both my parents when I moved out to LA, they were like, you have to go and do this, like you need to go and make this leap, you can always come back, blah 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 blah. But like from kind of everybody else in the outside world, I've always felt like, oh, I'm doing bad and I'm stupid.
There it is. So there's the samskar. It's the persistent feeling you carry with you. Right? So I think that imposter syndrome can grow on this, but this feels deeper to me than, because like there are a lot of people who blow up and have imposter syndrome, but are like narcissistic pricks who don't bend over backwards for anyone. Right? So I think your particular combination is like an insecurity that predates the YouTube, followed by an explosion of social media where like, you know, now suddenly everyone's treating you well. And it's like doubly perplexing because there's the normal dose of imposter syndrome, and that compounds with like the sense of like, am I really good at what I do? Am I really worthy? So now the question becomes, where does that, I'm curious, what do you think about the content you make?
I think it's fine. Honestly, like I think that it's entertaining for people, but it's nothing great. I think that I have made really cool stuff, but yeah, no, I do think that I just am another dude on YouTube, like, making videos, and I think that I'm doing things that anybody can do, and that I'm nothing special, and that I just got lucky, and I was at the right place at the right time.
I could get behind that.
Uh-huh.
So I know this sounds kind of weird, Ethan, but I think that's okay. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and like I think that that's very real, where it's just like I do genuinely think that like anybody can do what I do. It's not like I do anything profound, and like I make decent content, and I got really lucky, and like I worked really hard, and it worked out somehow.
Do you feel unworthy?
Yes and no. It depends. It kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. Because there are parts of me that, sort of like with the stupidity thing, where I can recognize, like, I busted my ass for years and years and years to like get where I am. But then there's other parts of me that are like, I know people that work so much harder than me and are better people than I am, and why aren't they where I'm at? Why was I the person that got handed this? I don't feel like I deserve it.
Okay. So I don't know why, Ethan, but I'm just kind of in a teaching mode today. And maybe it's because you're working with a therapist, but you seem very insightful to me. So I want to give you some stuff to kind of think about, as opposed to like maybe like meet you where you're at, which is normally what I do. Yeah. So here's what I'd recommend to you. And this is part of the process of like helping people overcome imposter syndrome. Why do you compare?
So that's something that I have a really hard time, is I'm constantly comparing myself to others. And I think it's because of like the people that are in my friend group, and like specifically on YouTube, like most of the people that I'm surrounded by are these insanely successful, talented people. And I constantly feel like, that I'm always overshadowed by them, and that I will never be able to escape that shadow ever. And I'll always just be that dude that's friends with X. And also, what was the other point that I was going to make?
I'll ask the question again.
Yeah.
Why do you always compare?
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing, is that people always compare me to them all the time. It's like, okay, Ethan did this person did that. Or like, I wish these people would do these things together or whatever. And it's always people comparing me to my friends. And so I always feel like I always compare myself to the people that I'm around, because other people do that to me as well.
How does it feel to be compared to these other people?
There's two sides of it, which are very opposite and conflicting. One part of it is like, I'm honored to be even remotely associated with these people, because these are people that I look up to, and that make some really amazing stuff, and that I genuinely like believe in the content that they make, and they're talented people. And then the other side of that is the exact opposite, where like it can be really degrading, where anything that I do is going to be compared to what these other people are doing. And it really sucks sometimes, where it's like, okay, can you just look at the thing that I made without bringing up these other people. Like, not everything that I do has to be connected to these other people.
Can I think for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm facing the challenge of how to try to condense, weeks